If you've ever stood in your kitchen thinking, I know what I should eat, but I just don't know what to make, this episode is for you. For many of us navigating autoimmune disease, healing doesn't hinge on a single ingredient or a protocol. It hinges on whether we can make nourishing food work in real life. Food that is satisfying, flavorful, flexible, and doesn't require a full afternoon of energy that we just don't have. And that's why some recipes just stick. They become the ones that you come back to again and again, not because they're fancy, but because they quietly support you on your hardest days. They're reliable, comforting, and realistic. And today's episode is about one of those recipes. Welcome back to the Autoimmune Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mickey Trescott, and this is a Small Bites episode. And today, I'm kicking off a brand new mini-series that I'm really excited about called Behind the Recipe. In these episodes, I will be cooking a recipe and then sitting down to talk about it, sometimes with the recipe author, sometimes with a friend, and sometimes highlighting recipes from the broader autoimmune community. The goal is to go beyond instructions and talk about why a recipe works, how you might adapt it, and what it teaches us about cooking for healing in a sustainable and real-life way. Joining me today is Ginny Mahar, and I'm so excited to have her here for the very first Behind the Recipe episode. Ginny is the author of the Thyroid30 Cookbook, which was released this week and officially out now. She is a Le Cordon Bleu trained chef and a functional medicine certified health coach, and her work focuses on creating supportive, nourishing recipes for people with thyroid conditions, including a number of recipes that are clearly labeled for core AIP. Ginny's journey into thyroid health began after being diagnosed with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's back in 2011. Through experimenting with food and lifestyle changes, she experienced firsthand how powerful, simple, whole food approaches can be. She went on to create Hypothyroid Chef and the Thyroid30 program to help others simplify their approach to healing and feel more like themselves again. So we're going to get Ginny on the line. Hey Ginny, I'm so glad to have you here. Your book just launched. How are you feeling now that it is officially out in the world?
Hi, Mickey. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's just surreal. This is my first cookbook, and for me, this has been a lifelong dream since I was 9 years old. I've been cooking since I was tall enough to turn on the stove. This is like my passion, really. And as you know, the process of creating a cookbook is, especially if you're doing the photos too, it's a wild ride. So it's been a lot, and especially when you're doing that with Hashimoto's. But beyond that, I'm just absolutely thrilled to be able to finally offer this to people, not just to hand over the recipe collection, but really for this like whole food, whole health system that Thyroid30 offers. I'm over the moon about it.
Oh, well, I wanted to have you on for this very first Behind the Recipe episode because you created a cookbook specifically for people with thyroid conditions, which is a very big part of the autoimmune community, but you are also very intentional about including recipes that meet core AIP guidelines. So you'll notice on the cover of the book, it says AIP friendly. So you guys know that a lot of these recipes are perfect if you're doing AIP. Today, we're going to talk about a recipe you graciously allowed me to share with everybody listening. They are the Veggie-Packed Meatloaf Muffins from the Thyroid30 Cookbook. You're going to find the full recipe linked in the show notes. And when I looked through my advanced copy of the book, this recipe immediately stood out because it's honestly everything I look for in a healing AIP recipe. It's a good amount of protein, it's got lots of vegetables, it's really easy to batch, and it's done in under an hour, honestly, a dream. And then bonus points for the incredible flavor. So before you and I talk about how to make them, I want to take a moment to describe them for anybody listening. These are individual meatloaf portions baked in a muffin tin. They're hearty, but they're not heavy. They're packed with finely chopped vegetables, and they hold together beautifully. When they come out of the oven, they're lightly browned on top, they're tender in the middle, and they're incredibly versatile. You can eat them hot, warm, or even cold. And honestly, they're the type of recipe that feels equally home on a dinner plate or pulled straight from the fridge when you need something quick. I have been eating them this week after my workouts as a little protein snack. They're so flexible. And so now that people can picture them, can you walk us through what's in these meatloaf muffins and the basic idea of how they come together?
Yeah, sure, Mickey. And I'm so glad that you picked this recipe because I think it's something that can really appeal to everyone as well. So these start with grass finished beef as the base, which is just so easy to work with. It's affordable, it's pretty easy to source these days. And then we combine that with a mixture of vegetables. So cauliflower rice, grated carrot, I like minced shallot, garlic, saute that in a little bit of olive oil to get them nice and tender, flavorful. Also to cook out just a little bit of the moisture, but you can mix up the veggies too. Zucchini would work really well here. If you don't have shallot, onion works great. So you can get a little bit creative there with what you put in these. Now, one thing about AIP meatloaf or meatballs, things like that, is that it does help it hold together to have a binder. And of course, we're not using eggs or breadcrumbs or things like that. So my favorite binder for this purpose is cassava flour, which is what I use in this recipe. For flavor, fresh herbs are always just one of my go-tos. They're so delicious. They're so aromatic. So there's a tablespoon each of thyme and rosemary in these. And then the other big flavor booster is my homemade Worcestershire sauce. And that's going to add some acidity, some sweetness, some umami flavors, and some spice. There's ginger, clove, cinnamon. So lots of nice flavor boosters there. And once we blend all that together, we just can divide that mix into our muffin molds, brush the top with a 1-to-1 blend of coconut aminos and balsamic vinegar. And that's going to help give the tops just that like glisteny glaze effect and also add like a final bright pop of flavor that just put these over the top.
I think it's a perfect recipe, 10 out of 10. When I made these, I have been turning them into a complete meal by just throwing a pan of sweet potatoes and broccolini in the oven at the same time. They cook at the same temperature, and you've got a whole batch cook right there. And it feels incredibly satisfying. And one thing that I really love is just how practical the portion sizes are. So 2 muffins, which you make 12 in the batch. And so 2 of them gives you about a 4-ounce serving of meat, which is a really easy building block for a meal. That's kind of where I like to base my protein portions. If you're somebody who just needs a quick breakfast, maybe even freezing them and reheating them, depending on what works for you. And I'd love to know, was batch cooking part of your intention when you designed this recipe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I'm all for batch cooking whenever possible, right? And I've done a lot of different like breakfast sausage recipes and things that I also will pre-cook and then reheat. So I knew that this was similar and that it would probably also store and freeze really well, which it does. But also, I was thinking about my son who loves mini meatloaves. And I mean, it could really be the same recipe in like a full-size loaf and it just wouldn't be as appealing for him. So I think that was part of my thinking too. Like miniaturizing things can go a long way toward making things a little bit more family friendly. And that can be really helpful when we're on elimination phase AIP, if we are cooking for a family, if we are cooking for kids. And, I love to cook, but even I don't want to make 2 dinners for my family. So I know when I can come up with something like this, especially recipes that are AIP compliant, that are batch cook friendly and family friendly, that's like a win-win-win in my book.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned just the portions appealing to certain people. I know that whenever I buy 2 pounds of meat, I'm just dividing it up in how many meals that's going to be because meat is the most expensive thing in our grocery budgets also. So I think having them portioned up really tells me like, okay, I'm going to have 2, which if you're cooking a big skillet or a soup or something, it's just really hard to tell, how much you are intending to eat of that. And so it makes it really easy there. Another big win for these is just how beautifully they freeze. Do you have any tips for freezing and making them ahead for when they're ready to go?
Yes, I do. So there's a couple different ways you can freeze this. And one thing you can do is you can make a double batch of the meat mixture and then you could bake half and also freeze the other half just as is, so that then all you have to do is thaw that, pop it into your muffin molds, brush the tops, and bake. So you could enjoy them fresh that way. The other way is you can bake them all ahead of time. And if you want to squirrel some away, they'll keep for about 4 or 5 days in the fridge. And, as you mentioned, they can be good cold, reheated. To freeze, I really like to freeze them on a sheet pan on some parchment first so that they don't stick together, and then pop those off of the sheet pan, put them into maybe a silicone freezer bag or another container so that then you can just grab as many as you want for a meal and reheat them that way. And what I do when I'm reheating things like this, or like my homemade breakfast sausage and things like that, we got to think about keeping them moist. So I find that the best way to do that is, well, ideally, if you have time and like the forethought and planning to thaw them in the fridge first, that's always going to be the best way to do it. But, being realistic, a lot of times we're like, oh, I need something to eat right now. What's in the freezer? So you can grab them frozen, and I'll typically use the microwave at like 50% power and start with a couple minutes so that they're just more gently thawed and heated through instead of like petrified on the outside and still frozen in the middle, which can happen like sometimes if you're using high power.
So let's talk about substitutions, because that's always something that people ask about, and we're big on substitutions in the AIP community. So first, let's talk about that Worcestershire sauce. I made your AIP version from the book. It is so flavorful. I was really surprised by it. I loved it. If somebody did not have time to make that, which I will say, start to finish making the sauce and making these muffins took me an hour, so it wasn't even that much time investment. But if somebody just doesn't want to make it, could something like some coconut aminos and fish sauce work in a pinch? Because really it's the umami that we're going for there, right?
Yeah, umami is part of it. And yes, I think fish sauce and coconut aminos could definitely work and is a great idea. You might want to cut down a little bit on the amount, like it wouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one substitution because both of those things are salty, the fish sauce and the coconut aminos. You might want to just dial it down so it doesn't get overly seasoned. But one of the other key ingredients in that Worcestershire sauce is apple cider vinegar. And that just adds a lot of brightness. It really helps with things like meatloaf or like those homemade sausage blends. And also anchovy adds a lot of umami flavor. So if I were to substitute, if I was just like, I don't have the ingredients or the time, or I don't feel like making a batch of the W sauce, I would probably do apple cider vinegar, coconut aminos, and then either fish sauce or some minced anchovy even. And that would kind of help you get those basic flavor elements that the homemade Worcestershire sauce provides. I will echo that W sauce is really easy to make. It's super simple. It takes less than 20 minutes. You can freeze it for up to 3 months. So if you have most of the ingredients on hand, it's also probably worth it to just whip up a batch. You can use it for marinades, burgers, and just, the acidity and brightness goes a long way flavor-wise. I really tried to integrate that into the Thyroid30 Cookbook, like this system where people could make some of these simple staple condiments and have them on hand, use them in several different recipes to boost flavor, to make them more interesting.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because whenever we do these protocols, the thing that people complain about is just that it lacks flavor and excitement. You're kind of eating the same foods over and over, which we know is so nice for convenience because we've batch cooked and we've planned ahead. But just having something that is adding flavor is really transformative. So I'm going to encourage you guys to pick up Ginny's book and check out that sauce because it is really nice. What about switching up the protein? So instead of beef, could we try lamb, pork, turkey? Do you have any thoughts on how to make those modifications if people wanted to?
Yeah, I say feel free. I think some of the best options here would be wild game. Bison, lamb would be absolutely perfect here. I really love ground turkey. I always look for a blend of light and dark meat with poultry so that it stays a little bit more moist and flavorful. I'd probably also add like a tablespoon of olive oil or a little bit of additional fat just to keep that mixture moist. Same goes for ground chicken. Again, I feel like more often I'll see like 100% ground chicken breast sometimes with no dark meat. That's going to be very, very lean, quite a bit more prone to dryness. So sometimes what I'll do if I'm using that is maybe I'll do 1 pound of that and 1 pound of something a little bit fattier, like even a pound of ground pork. You could combine a pound of chicken and a pound of pork here. So that would work really well. You do have to think about dryness with those super lean meats, especially poultry, even some ground beef blends that have like less than 10% fat. But I think that's part of what works with these is that the veggies do sort of help to keep the meat moist.
Yeah, I love that. Ground pork and turkey is actually one of my favorite combos to kind of combat how lean the poultry is. Another thing I kept thinking while having these was just how well they would pair with a sauce like a barbecue sauce and just kind of switch up the flavor profile. I've got a couple on my website. I've got a cherry barbecue sauce and an apricot one. I love the idea of serving these with something like that on the side. Do you have any favorite ways to serve these or a different way to add flavor without complicating the recipe?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, first, your cherry barbecue sauce would be amazing on these, or the apricot, either of those. I think those sweet and savory combinations are always so good and definitely some of my favorites. And that's why I have your books up on the shelf right in my kitchen next to my own. I think those would be wonderful options. Really, anything that would work well on regular meatloaf would work well here. So again, those sweet and sour flavors, even like a no-mayo ketchup might be a good AIP option. I also really like these with that sort of classic mashed potato pairing. So I have a recipe in the book for velvety truffle mashed cauliflower and white sweet potatoes, and that looks like and tastes similar to like a traditional mashed potato. Now, if you were going to do something like that, you could also go with something really savory, like an AIP friendly gravy. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to roast a turkey to make gravy. It can be as simple as some cassava flour, make a roux with some kind of AIP friendly fat, and use some really good beef bone broth or even any kind of like homemade bone broth. I think would work really well to make a quick gravy. Add maybe a touch of that W sauce for a little bit of acidity and zing. That's another one I find that's really family friendly too. Put gravy on anything and my kiddo will eat it.
Oh, I love that. I also want to call out how much I love that these are so veggie forward. So I know they look like a meat dish, but there is a lot of carrot and cauliflower in here. And the fact that the cauliflower is frozen and pre-riced, it just feels like a win for people who are tired or overwhelmed. And we're always looking for cooking hacks to just make things easier for people. Was that accessibility piece intentional for you in this cookbook?
Yes. And, I think one of the realities that we live with when we are living with chronic illness, when we're living with autoimmune illness, is that we need to cook more. We need to cook more for ourselves. And so it needs to be accessible, simple, doable. It needs to be time efficient. And I also learned really early on when I started blogging thyroid-friendly recipes at Hypothyroid Chef that I had had previous food blogs where it was more just about like regular recipes, chefy recipes, right? Well, all of a sudden now I'm not catering to people who are foodies. I was catering to people, including myself, who don't necessarily feel good, don't necessarily have a lot of energy to cook, who don't necessarily like or want to cook, but they do want to feel better. And so that community that I serve, really, we need easy, whole food recipes that taste good, that our families will like, that are quick and easy to make, that we'd be excited to share with company, with whoever we're sharing meals with. I really had to shift out of that chef mindset of, I need to blow their minds, I need to impress, into more of a mindset of how can I use my time-saving and flavor-boosting chef tricks to make this more easy and delicious for people. It's got to be low lift. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to get out my giant food processor to make cauliflower rice if I don't have to. Things like that are so wonderful, such favorite time savers with those frozen veggies. The prep is done. They're washed, chopped, ready to go. The quality and nutritional value is typically just as good as fresh. So that's one of my favorite time-saving hacks.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that some of these ingredients have become so affordable too. Before we wrap up, I would love for you to share a bit more about the Thyroid30 Cookbook, who it's for, what people can expect, and where they can find it now that it's officially out.
Yeah, the Thyroid30 Cookbook, it has 100 gluten-free, dairy-free, anti-inflammatory recipes. There's 3 different 30-day meal plans that include gluten-free, dairy-free, paleo, and AIP. I cover and sort of cater to and try to provide modifications for all of those common dietary templates that people in the thyroid community use. So I would say over a third of the recipes in the book are elimination phase AIP friendly, and the rest of them are modifiable and friendly for the reintroduction phases of AIP. And then it also is really a complete guide to my Thyroid30 system, really designed to help people embark on this journey of not just what should I eat and what is the lifestyle aspect of this, but how do I do these things consistently and sustainably so that I can feel better for the long term, not just 30 days. All of the recipes are really based on the fundamental principles of functional nutrition, which is geared towards the management and prevention of chronic illness. So, of course, this is tailored to the thyroid community and addresses a lot of the unique challenges we face. The recipes, I think, are really friendly for anyone in the autoimmune community, anyone looking for colorful, whole food, anti-inflammatory meals that are just easy, accessible, and full of flavor. So yeah, the book is out now. Pretty much anywhere books are sold. You can learn more on my site at hypothyroidchef.com/cookbook. But yeah, just go to your favorite bookseller and you should be able to find the Thyroid30 Cookbook there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ginny, not just for being here, but for creating recipes that truly support people in the day-to-day of healing. You'll find the full Veggie-Packed Meatloaf Muffins recipe linked in the show notes, and more information about how you can get your hands on the Thyroid30 Cookbook. And I will be seeing you guys next time for another Kitchen Confidence episode. See you next time.